Hello and greetings to all of you today. Thank you so much for joining this session. We are slowly seeing as the numbers stream in. Thank you very much. We are aware you're joining in from all the parts of the globe. Thank you so much. We appreciate your presence here today. And we will start shortly. Maybe as you join in, you can just let us know where you're joining us from in terms of location and your organization as we slowly let our colleagues join us. Thank you so much. Really, really impressive to see sort of the heat map in different parts of the map. Really, really, really great. Thank you all. Welcome, welcome all. Thank you, colleagues. Once again, to those joining us, please let us know where you're joining us from today and your organization. The numbers streaming in. Thank you so much. We are very pleased to see the level of engagement we have today. So we'll start in the next minute. So let's just give our colleagues 1 minute and then we can kick off, cognizant of time for everyone. Thank you so much. Okay, I think let's get started and everyone else can then just join in later and they can continue from where we will be with the deliberations. Just to make a quick announcement here, housekeeping, we offer simultaneous interpretation to French, Portuguese, and Spanish, and all the requisite icons should be at the bottom of your respective screens. Just have a check now, and if you face some challenges, please just drop us a line in the chat, and our team will try to get you sorted out as fast as possible. So we have French, Spanish, and Portuguese available. Check at the bottom of your screen. You should have the respective buttons. In case of anything, just chat us and we will respond to you as fast as possible. Thank you so much once again, and we hope that this session will be very interactive. We, of course, are very thrilled to have this knowledge sharing session with our panelists today, who we'll introduce later. But we also look forward to, a very active engagement from the audience in the form of the input and questions today. Feel free to use the chat and Q&A functions here and we will, of course, respond to some of your questions during the session in the discussions, but some of the inquiries shall be directly responded to in the chat. And also, as part of starting the session, we will be engaging you, just to get the vibe started, just to get the conversation started, to get your perspective on the topic of discussion today. We shall be doing a Mentimeter poll, so just have your phones or devices ready or your browser started, and then we shall share more details as we proceed. Please, we look forward to a very lively engagement. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate that you are here today. So we look forward to hearing from you. This is your session. We look forward to your engagement. I think we can proceed. So just to provide the guidance, here we are. We have the Mentimeter here. You can either scan the QR code on the right-hand side of your screen or go to www.menti.com and enter the code. That brings you to the page where we are undertaking this live poll. Yeah, I see from the show of hands there that connection is working well. We have a couple of people joined in, so let's try get there and just do a quick round of questions there just to get us started. Okay, the first question. Are you aware about the concept of anti-corruption, ethics and compliance programs and their use in business? We are curious to just know the level of understanding in this area, just to sort of, put ourselves into perspective as we proceed. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Of course, we're very cognizant that we have a diverse group here today, with most of you being representatives from the private sector. So thank you very much. As we can see there, most of the people there have a yes, and a couple are unsure. Of course, we shall get to understand these gray areas later and what we mean by all this topics of discussion today. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. So someone requested to have, if we could just have a quick sharing on the chat on the QR code and the code. Thank you. Okay, let's proceed, please, to the next question. Does your company have anti-corruption, ethics, and compliance programs in place? Do you have this currently existing in your company? And of course, owing to the fact that we've seen a couple of yeses being the majority response, this is a good place to understand where we lie. Does your company have anti-corruption, ethics, and compliance program in place? Yes, I see there's a huge number in terms of, there's a huge correlation between the previous yeses and the yeses here, almost aligned, which is good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for everyone responding. Please respond on the Menti. Thank you. It helps us to track and sort of have this nice visualization. Okay, so we have majority of yeses. Super. Okay. Yes, no, also curious to see about the no's, and yeah, this is something we can follow up on later. Thanks. Please, let's proceed to the next question. So if present, how effective is your company in implementing this anti-corruption policies and the expectations to employees? Does your company implement these things well? And does it communicate well to the employees? How does this happen in your organization? We have 4 rankings there from 4. Okay, good and great. Okay. Thank you so much. We're seeing all the responses coming in. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I see the numbers are also quite similar to the in terms of the total figures to what we've had previously. So yeah, most of you are between okay and good. Of course, much more can be done. Thank you so much. This is a very good break into our session as we commence our webinar today. Okay, thank you so much. So the last question is, who is responsible for the implementation and execution of anti-corruption ethics and compliance programs? Whose responsibility is this for the execution and implementation of these programs that we've discussed? Who do you think is responsible for this? Okay, majority of you are with senior management. Okay, yeah, we see employees there, government. Thank you so much. Again, please try and respond on Menti because the chat might not be really monitored as far as this exercise goes. Thank you. Interesting. Super. Yeah, I've seen a comment that says everyone, which is also an interesting response, and we'll hear on this later. Okay. Thank you. I think with that we can move on now. And thank you so much for your engagement on this exercise. It really helps to just get the room started. And I'll just do an introduction of today's deep dive session. And the topic of today is from policy to action, implementing anti-corruption ethics and compliance programs in your company. So what will happen is we will have a brief introduction into the session, and then which will be followed by a presentation by the UN Global Compact. And then we will have a panel discussion where we have 3 representatives, our distinguished panelists, who will give us more examples about, what's the topic of the day, and they have these key insights. So without further ado, I welcome you all to this session, and I will proceed with the introduction. So my name is Benjamin Mirici, and I work with the private sector team at the Corruption and Economic Crime Branch at the UNODC, where our key focus really is fostering business integrity in the private sector globally. So this deep dive virtual session is a product of a collaboration between the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, and the United Nations Global Compact, UNGC. On behalf of all, I welcome you all to this session today, and thank you for your time and interest. And we, of course, encourage your active engagement throughout the session. And of course, again, I'm cognizant that we have a diverse group here, and the larger percentage is from the private sector. So from this topic, from the topic of today, you can get a sense that this session is something within a continuum. Indeed, this is the 5th session of a global series inspired by the UN Global Compact management model. And we have had prior sessions where we've discussed a range of topics, from integrity-driven leadership to corruption risk assessment to defining of policies, and the first recently concluded thematic session on the gender dimensions of business integrity. The event brings together diverse perspectives, providing a space for interaction, dialogue, and knowledge sharing. And the webinar series as well enables the sharing of good practices and tackling of common challenges through collaborative action. In so doing, we have the enhancement of the public-private cooperation and the upscaling of effective approaches all towards business integrity. So all these sessions that I've mentioned are available on the UNODC Business Hub, which I will also touch on at the end of the session. And just to note that today's session will be recorded and will also be added to a list of resources that we have on the hub in due course. I will invite Dr. Fabian from UNGC who will give us a presentation. Of course, he'll introduce himself, tell us what he does at UNGC, and give us the technical presentation from the UN Global Compact. Thank you very much, and Dr. Fubia, welcome, please.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. I'm happy to join us today. I am Fabian Espejo. I am the coordinator of anti-corruption programs and collective action at the UN Global Compact. I have a PhD in politics at Penn University, and I have worked for more than 10 years in the United Nations system on anti-corruption topics, basically, in UNDP, UNODC, and currently the UN Global Compact. Thank you, Benjamin. So, today's presentation is going to be focused on implementation of anti-corruption programs. Execution and implementation of anti-corruption programs is very important because it depends on the commitment of the board of directors, the senior management, but also of the employees. The company should develop a roadmap to carry out its own anti-corruption program, and the anti-corruption program involves policies and procedures that aims at addressing corruption risk, pursuing opportunities, reducing and mitigating negative impacts, and enhancing positive impacts. In the case of implementing anti-corruption programs is important, as I say, the commitment of the board of directors and the senior management. So I'm going to talk a little bit about seeking guidance, detection and reporting of wrongdoings, addressing violations, application of the program, the anti-corruption program to business partners, as these are key issues when you are analyzing how to implement the anti-corruption programs and to make them effective in your business. So the program must be effective, efficient, and sustainable. It should be ensured that the anti-corruption program is implemented, executed, and monitored on an ongoing basis. When you are answering the questions regarding to who is responsible to implement the anti-corruption program, the rule is that it's the senior management, of course, but it's good to bear in mind that the employees also have an important role to play, and we are going to see why they have a relevant role to play and why they have to be involved in all the measures adopted by the organization to implement the anti-corruption program. So responsibility for overseeing the program rests with the board of directors, the compliance committee, and compliance officer, or an audit or ethics committee. But it's important to bear in mind that the senior management has to implement, execute, and make it effective the application of the measures that have been adopted by the company to make effective the anti-corruption program. So we have internal controls and record keeping as an important component part of the anti-corruption program. Internal controls provide reasonable assurance of the effectiveness and efficiency of the company's operations, the reliability of its disclosure practice, and its compliance with applicable laws, regulations, and internal policies. If you have a good system of internal controls, you will be able to avoid being externally exposed to reputational damages. So it's important to have good measures within your company to be able to control and to keep inside the organization any risk of corruption and have the measures to be able to control and diminishing the risk of the corruption risk materialization. So it is also highly recommendable to have books and records. It's very useful because you can have evidence in case of weaknesses and irregularities if the irregularities are identified within the organization. They not only refer to financial transactions, but also include contracts, delivery receipts. So it's very important to have all the information as much as possible. You should have backup of the documents. You should have record of all the transactions, electronic documents, and have and special protections with some kind of documents. For instance, establish that a statement like not to destroy before the deadline, and such kind of statements are very useful to keep the information, the records in order. And it is highly recommendable as well to have all the documents organized in a chronological order. So all the information is important because in case of an infringement, the evidence is so relevant in order to prove that there was a breach of any internal rule within the organization. And this is a relevant topic also, the communication and training. Training is so important, and we have to know that we have 882 people with us today. So training is of paramount importance. It should be provided on a regular basis to all the employees or the most exposed employees. Sometimes you think that it's the higher level employees that should be trained, but actually all the employees, because within an organization, every single employee has a specific role, and in the organization, it should develop different processes, different activities, and there are different employees in charge of each process and activity. So there are many risks within an organization in different areas and in different processes and in different activities. So it's very important to train as much employees as possible on these topics, on ethics and anti-corruption topics. The trainings should include also business partners. It's very relevant because you can be very careful with your measures within your organization, but you could be in a high level of exposure because of your partners. You can have reputational damages because of the misbehavior of your partners. So you should include your partners in your training, and you should apply a criteria for recruitment, criteria for business relationship. I'm going to talk about it later. And link the trainings to special occasions like, for instance, the International Anti-Corruption Day, 9th of December. We have trainings in flagship moments, and it's very important just to create a culture of ethics and business integrity. The evaluation should be done frequently. You know that the fight against corruption is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So you have to keep working on it. So you have to, on a frequent basis, you should be assessing your controls, you should be assessing the level of knowledge of your employees. It is important also to have channels for training and communication, like the websites and newsletters, self-learning emails. All these tools are very useful to reach as much employees as possible. And it's highly recommendable to have standardized training at least once a year to train the employees about ethics and anti-corruption. But of course, if you can do it within the organization more frequently, it would be great. One important thing when talking about implementing anti-corruption programs is promoting and incentivizing ethics and compliance. The company may consider an incentive scam. Why? Because most of times the senior management focuses more on the sanctions rather than on the incentives, and the incentives are very important to promote a culture within the organization. And to know that behave in an ethical way is something that should be rewarded. So there are many types of incentives, like financial rewards and non-financial rewards. Financial rewards are like, for instance, salaries increase, bonus, promotions, gifts cards. For members, they can be privileged access to business opportunities and preferential business terms. And there are also non-financial rewards, like recognition rewards, awards, publications in the press, access to courses, recognition by management. So it is highly recommendable to adopt as much non-financial rewards as possible, because it's important to create, as I mentioned, the culture of the organization about business integrity and ethics. And it is not recommendable to just refer to financial rewards and to link ethical behavior with profit, because it's not about profit only, but it's also about a change of mind, adopt a high level standard of ethics and integrity. So incentives are very important. If you have financial rewards or non-financial rewards are very important, because you have to encourage your employees to, to adopt all the high standards, the high ethical standards of the organization. It's like the, carrot and stick. The carrot is the incentives which should be promoted by the organization, and the stick is related to the guidelines, detection, and reporting of violations. Detection is a positive sign that the program is working and should not be perceived as a flaw in the system. This is very important because sometimes you think that if you have detection system within the organization and you find out that there are some symptoms of corruption, it's a bad signal. Actually, it's not. Actually, it's a good signal that your controls and your tools are working properly and that you are able to adopt measures to avoid a risk of corruption being materialized in the organization. So it's very important, the detection systems, and it's important to understand that there are different levels. One is seeking guidance. The organization should provide a safe environment for reporting risk of corruption or detecting violations of the ethics of the company. So the company should provide guidance, should have a person in charge of dealing with the whistleblowers reports and violations of internal rules, the anti-corruption rules of the organization. So it could be your organization can hire an external provider. I will say later why. I'm referring to the reporting of violation of whistleblowing. So it's important to have at least one person. It could be in-house, but it also could be hired to be an external provider to facilitate the reporting of violations. So the second point is detection of violations. Detection of violations could be identified internally, because you have some reports of corruption within your organization. You have insiders that can report issues related to corruption or risk of corruption, but also external. The problem you have when you detect corruption externally is that the information is outside the company, and everybody knows that you have a problem dealing with corruption within your organization. So it's highly advisable to create as much as internal controls as possible to be able to keep all the corruption, scandals, scams within your organizations, and to have specific controls to handle with them. The third point is reporting violations, whistleblowing. Whistleblowing should be included as a core subject and in communications. It's very important to promote whistleblowing within the organization. It's very positive because the whistleblower is an insider of your company, and the whistleblower is able to understand what is actually happening inside the company. Most of the time, if an employee knows exactly what is the problem, what is the process affected by that corruption issue, so he will be able to communicate such issue, and the senior manager will be able to take the necessary measures to avoid the risk of corruption. So it's very important to promote whistleblowing. It's very important to create some safe spaces to report corruption scams or corruption issues within your organization. The whistleblower should be protected by the company. Not only the information that he provides to the senior management about the corruption scandal or corruption scam, but also the person itself should be protected effectively. And the information provided by the whistleblower should be treated in a professional way during the should be provided a safe space, and should be provided a safe space to report corruption issues. I'm running out of time. It's important also to understand that it's important to have a disciplinary policy. A disciplinary policy involves three key issues: a catalog of sanctions, guidelines on procedures and responsibilities, and an opportunity to appeal. Please bear in mind that anti-corruption doesn't justify violations of the due process of the good faith principle during the entire process of the disciplinary policy, when you are going to materialize a sanction, for instance, you should bear in mind that you should be very respectful of the due process. You should be very respectful of the right of the syndicate to be heard. And you have to understand that the principle of good faith, should be present in the entire investigation and in the entire process. That's why the opportunity to appeal is so important. So applying sanctions, sanctions may be directed at employees, fines, reduction in remuneration. Some laws doesn't allow such kind of actions. So it's important to know that your measures, your sanctions are not against the law. They should be aligned with the law. They should be in accordance with the law. They should respect the public law of your country, should be respectful of the labor laws. So in some countries, it's not important, it's not possible the reduction in remuneration. And also transfer to a lower position. Sometimes it's against the labor law. But the idea is that you have to apply the sanctions, and the sanctions have to be in accordance with your local law, with the national law, because it's public law. So the notification of violation is so important. It's relevant, and to have a clear protocol about how to proceed in case of a violation. You cannot surprise your employee with new procedures, new measures, but they should have at least knowledge what happened in case of a violation. And this is very, very, very important. So deciding on the remedial actions is the detection of an attempt of violation is an opportunity to identify potential areas for program improvement, improve the internal control environment, increase communication and training, or adjust the entire disciplinary policy. Incidents should be documented for future monitoring. There is something which is the importance of communicate to the entire organization what has happened, and in order to avoid in the future such kind of wrongdoings happening again. So the incidents should be well documented, and we should communicate to the entire organization to avoid the incidents happening. Business partners are so important because if you adopt a good anti-corruption program, but if you have business partners that are not as responsible as you in adopting such measures, you can be exposed to reputational risks. So you have to bear in mind that your programs should be promoted among your subsidiaries, affiliates, joint ventures, agents, and intermediaries, contractors, and suppliers. So there is a different level of control on these different business partners, but disregarding the level of control that you have on them is very, very and highly advisable to use your high-level standards, the standards of business integrity and transparency and integrity that you have within your business. You should promote with your business partners in order to avoid reputational risks. You don't want to be involved in a corruption scam because one of your business partners have low standards of anti-corruption programs. So finally, just to conclude, public reporting is so important. Summarizing, I can say that it is important to involve the board of directors in all the process. Don't forget it is the fight against corruption is marathon. It takes time. It's an ongoing process. So turn from the top, the top of the organization should be involved in all, not only in the risk assessment, not only in the preventive measures, but also in implementing measures to sanction violations of the integrity program and the anti-corruption program. So it's important to be clear with employees. It's important to provide clear information about the procedures. It is important to establish clear information about what is the consequence of a violation of the anti-corruption program. So that's the most important thing is the public reporting is also important. Public reporting is also important to let others know what your company is doing to prevent corruption, but also how your company deals effectively with violations of the code of ethics, of the anti-corruption program, or the integrity and rules that your organization have about. So thank you so much, Benjamin. That's my technical presentation. I'm sure we have us run out of time.
Thank you so much, Fabian. Maybe what you can touch on next is just maybe what kind of resources you have from UNGC, and maybe just discuss a bit about what we have upcoming in relation to the events.
UNODC and the Global Compact have developed many guidelines and tools on these issues that should be ready if you have time to take a look at them, because they provide detailed information about what I have approached in this brief presentation. For instance, the Anti-Corruption Ethics and Compliance Program for Business, the practical guide of UNODC, is a very good document. It have a lot of information. It contains checklists about what you have to include in your disciplinary policy, what you should have bear in mind when you are developing your whistle protection scheme. All this information is included in these documents. You also have the 10 principles against corruption, the reporting guidance on the 10 principles against corruption. It's a document that, the 10 principle is related to the fight against corruption. So it includes a specific protocol about how sanctions should be applied, how measures should be applied, and how the controls can be improved within your organization to be effective in the fight against corruption. So these are the resources that you can just download from the websites of UNODC or UN Compact for free. So what's coming, Benjamin? Question. We have the Private Sector Forum, is the 20th anniversary of the Conference of the United Nations Conventions Against Corruption. So we have the Conference of the State Parties, and in the frame of the Conference of the State Parties, on December 11 and 12, we have the Private Sector Forum. It's a very important scenario because we have companies and representatives from the private sector that are going to discuss key issues related to anti-corruption, and the last trends on the fight against corruption. So we are going to have many sessions, technical sessions, and the idea is just to invite you to be with us in Atlanta, in the Conference of State Parties. Is the 20th anniversary, and it is the first time that we have a special event, the Private Sector Forum, just to have a private sector discussing the key topics, new trends about anti-corruption and integrity and business integrity. But also, I want to invite you to sign the call to action on CAGA 20. The call to action is an appeal on behalf of companies for governments to underscore anti-corruption and good governance. It's free. The link has been shared by my colleague Anna. And please join us in this initiative. It's very important. It's important because it's a way in which the private sector say to the governments that they have a real commitment, not only on paper, but a real commitment to fight against corruption and to support the anti-corruption initiative and the promotion of business integrity in the entire world. So it's for free. You can sign the call to action to show that you are really committed with the business integrity and don't lose this opportunity. The deadline is December 1st. So please join us in this important initiative in the call to actions UNCAGA 20. Thank you so much, Benjamin.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fabian. And maybe just to add on something before I forget, the deadline for submission of your application for the Private Sector Forum is the 30th of November. So I really encourage the private sector representatives here today to just sign up as soon as possible if you're interested in attending this. And yes, we look forward to also your engagement on the call to action. Thanks so much, Dr. Fabian. And you've really put us in a perspective of this discussion, and we're really appreciative of your insight. And I think what I'll do, I had some questions for you, but I think maybe what we can do is just proceed to the next step. And if we have some time left, then I could come back to you if that's fine. So thank you so much for that. So increasingly, we've seen a number of companies, demonstrating ethical leadership by implementing effective anti-corruption ethics and compliance programs internally, and following the development of action plans based on risk assessment. The next expected shift involves moving from policy to implementation of these strategies and policies throughout the company and across its value chain, and essentially having an effective integrity and compliance program designed to support the business in making important decisions that are aligned with its corporate goals and strategy is crucial for a business. To successfully implement various policies, it's essential to take capacity building, training, and communication of the policies to employees and other parties within the business. Additionally, an internal control system should be established with reporting channels such as a confidential whistleblowing mechanism in place to encourage employees to report potential misconduct without fear of retaliation, and in so doing, prevent and detect wrongdoing, which really brings us to the next segment in our presentation today. We have a very good set of panelists from Malaysia, Tanzania, and Uruguay. And our panelists today will help us engage in a dialogue on how to unpack how companies can essentially engage in processes to execute their strategy throughout the organization. From an anti-corruption perspective, I welcome Ms. Nuri, Mr. Hamad, and Ms. Fernanda. And maybe just to start with Ms. Nuri from Malaysia, if you could just briefly introduce yourself and tell us more about what you do and how you are situated within today's topic, and then I can follow up with some questions for you. Welcome, you have the floor.
Thank you, Benjamin, and hello, everyone. It is actually about 11:42 p.m. in Malaysia. I'm very happy to see some of my Malaysian colleagues join this forum and hope we can stay awake to the end of the forum. So I am thrilled to be part of this forum dedicated to the vital journey from policy to action when it comes to anti-corruption ethics and compliance program in a company. I currently serve as the Integrity and Governance Unit Office Head of Integrity and Governance Unit, and also the Compliance Officer for Maxis Berhad, and we are actually a telco company in Malaysia. And where in that company, I am deeply involved in the strategic planning and execution of all the compliance and integrity program. And as you can see at my background, we are making sustainability part of our DNA, in which we are upholding ESG principles as well. So with almost 20 years of experience as a certified integrity officer, because in Malaysia, we do have a Prime Minister's directive in terms of establishing integrity and governance unit in government linked company, government linked investment company, and also private sector. So there is an academy that is hosted by the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission. They will actually train and certify compliance fraternities, and there is an association as well. It's called the Association of Certified Integrity Officer, and in which the regulator, which is our MECC, the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, will monitor our progress, and we will be called to a meeting twice a year to discuss on our progress and what do we do in the company. So I had the privilege on working with comprehensive anti-corruption and ethics program for the nation as well, way back in 2010 with the national key result area, and now in Malaysia, we also have National Anti-Corruption Plan that is coming to an end, and we are coming up with another strategies to combat and eradicate corruption. So it is a multiple stakeholder initiative that it has been taken place in our space in Malaysia between the government, the private sector, and also the civil society. So currently, it is my firm belief that effective compliance is not just about having the right policies in place, but it's also translating them into a culture of integrity and making sure that it's embedded in their thoughts and mind, and having the integrity that is doing the right thing even when no one is looking is very crucial. So I am passionate about all the subject you name it, corruption risk assessment, anti-bribery management system, which I'm excited to share later in the discussion. And also I've been involved with a lot of discussion and panels in local and also international level. And I'm so happy to be here, and thank you, Benjamin, for inviting me for tonight. I look forward to connecting with all of you and being part of the community that's dedicated to turning ethical and compliance to aspiration to the real world results. Thank you, Benjamin. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Nuri. Honestly, I think we're really privileged to be having you. And of course, knowing the time in Malaysia now, we really, really are grateful for you and your colleagues who are joining us from that part of the world. Thank you indeed for just situating this conversation within the context of your company in Malaysia. And maybe just to just follow up on the brief you've given us. I'm just curious, what kind of steps do you have, or what kind of steps are taken by the organization, by your organization, to ensure that the employers actually are aware of and are trained on the company's anti-corruption ethics and compliance policies and procedures? And the second one, maybe if you could just respond on this as well, is how your company actually monitors and assesses compliance with anti-corruption, because it's one thing to do and one thing to actually ensure that things are happening. And what measures then do you have in place for reporting of violations on these policies? Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Benjamin, for the question. There's two questions, so I must remember to answer it structurally. So basically, before coming out with anti-corruption program in my company, what I have done is I come up with a framework. So in the framework, normally it will consist of policy, having the right procedures in place, and with the system to support whatever policy and procedures that you have already had. And if you have an additional resource, you can opt for technology. For example, if you are doing due diligence, you can opt for external due diligence provider to do all the screenings for your company, for the third party, and also for your internal staff. And also, most importantly, is on the people and culture. For my company in Maxis, and also the company that I have joined before, which is an oil and gas company, and I was with the regulator. So most important thing is education, which is training and communication. It is very critical for any of the policies to be communicated clearly. Give them the clarity, give them the support, make it simple as possible, because you have to add a soul to every training that you do and make sure that is uniquely designed for each of the stakeholder, because it cannot you cannot always design a training that one size fits all, kind of, the same training for the employers, then you suddenly want to turn that training to the third parties. It will be different, the tone will be different, even to the board directors. I must share with you, this morning at 8 a.m. in the morning, I just conducted a training with my board of directors of Maxis Berhad. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, I made them understand, talk about anti-corruption, talk about culture, talk about commitment. And also at the end of the training, they have to say a pledge, which is the integrity pledge. It is something that it has to come from tone from the top and echoing from bottom up. So that means the clarity of what we are trying to tell our people. For example, if you're having some sort of gift policy, you have to make it clear, as simple as possible, that they must declare, and the general rule is to say no, to refuse, and what are the exceptions if there's any. And then make sure it is written in a simpler language. Do not ask your legal people to draft the policy, because it will become very complicated. Make it as layman word as possible, so that people can just remember in a simple manner, okay, what they need to do if in such situation, in providing and also in receiving gift in the policy. And plus, you make it simple for them to know where to declare. If you have extra budget, put in the system, make use the technology, digitalize it, make use a simple few buttons for them to declare who is it from, what is the intention, what is the value, so that we have transparency in terms of reporting what has been received and what to provide. Make it easier for them. But most importantly, do not just communicate within your people. You need to also communicate to the third party, so they understand these are the culture, these are the behavior that we want to have and establish in our company, to ensure that we continue doing business in a clean business ecosystem without corruption, and the sustainability of the business will be there, and we can continue doing business together. So that kind of narrative and culture should be embedded in each and every one in the company, and also to those people who is your business partner, and even to the government, because people always have the perception when you deal with the government or public sector, it's always a red flag. But actually, if you know and you acknowledge the red flag and you come up with the right remedial action to manage the red flag, to minimize the risk, then it will be okay. For example, if there are government requests for sponsorship or donation, you should come up with a process that is to everyone transparent and have someone accountable. So it has to be documented, it has to be collectively agreed, it has to has a criteria, and it has to be clear. So when you respond to such requests, you can say, okay, this is our company's policy, and we don't want to be perceived as contributing politically. So hence, it's very important to make sure whatever that has been discussed, or whatever is minuted properly, is discussed at greater length, and make it into policy, turn it into a good procedure, come up with a system to support it, and communicate. That's the magic word. So back to Malaysia now, we already have this corporate liability provision that has been enforced since the 1st of June 2020. So companies are held accountable if they are involved in bribery, in providing gratifications. So and the only defense mechanism that we have for business community in Malaysia is to make sure that we have adequate procedures, and the government have actually give us the guideline. But of course, we don't know. We never know how adequate is adequate for the procedure. So how do we measure it? Like in Maxis, I have no idea how much procedures, how adequate all the controls, internal controls that I have put in place. So what I did, I opt for the system, which is called the ISO 37001, because it's an international standard. It will give a check and balance mechanism where there is an external audit, there will be a stage for management review, and all the reports are done in such a systematic way within the requirements of ISO. So the measure does not just stop there, because the system itself doesn't confirm that corruption will not happen or bribery will not happen, but at least it will become a preventive measures to minimize if there's any such exposure that will be happening in the company. So far, after 3 years, I must say it's an endless effort to keep on improvising, enhancing all the internal controls. So what I did in my company, every quarterly we will update our bribery and corruption risk assessment, and we have a dashboard in which I will have the access to all the divisions and department, and we also appointed compliance champion in every division and department to become our ears and eyes, and also they hold some KPI in which I will guide them throughout the year. I will train them to be my own compliance champion, and of course we when they are stuck or if they need help, I will always assist them accordingly and provide them with enough training. And not just the training will not just come from me, I will also assign them to go out and seek for further knowledge, because it's a learning journey in terms of making sure that our system works. And another measurement that we did is just recently, what I did, I did a survey to measure effectiveness of whatever culture that we have in the company. It's not just according to the checklist, according to the adequate procedures or whatnot, but what we want to measure is beyond integrity, the willingness to speak up if they come across any misconduct, or if they sense that somebody try to solicit something. So we try to measure their willingness and also their compliance level, and we also ask them whether do they agree if enforcement and compliance is weak in the company. So it's a twisted question. So everybody, when we had the session, because what I did, I gather small groups of people every week, over lunch because they are a bit more relaxed and they can think further, and less of me talking, is more of them sharing of their work dilemmas and challenges. And then we also try to get the respondent to respond to the curated survey question, and the result was amazing because I did the same survey last 3 years, and when I measure it, I can see there's an improvement, 90% of culture change, which is a great success. Yeah.
Wow, I think we can all agree this is really phenomenal, and I've been seeing some of the responses to your intervention, and I think thank you so much for your enlightenment of us and just giving us the example from your company. I think there's a question which is related to your presentation later, and maybe from the audience,
Sure.
and I'll come back to you later. So thank you so much for your intervention.
Thank you,
I'll now
Benjamin.
move. Thank you so much. I'll now move on to Mr. Hamad from Zanzibar, Tanzania. Please introduce yourself and what you do and how this topic of today relates to your work. Thank you.
Yeah, hello. Good evening, good morning. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone here. Thank you so much, Benjamin, and I would like to thank you once again for putting us on board in this session. But my sincerely gratitude for Madame, who has just finished her presentation. I think it was a eye opener. It was a mind blower for all of us here of how things are happening in Malaysia when it comes to anti-corruption, especially from the private sector perspective. And this, I think, has set the ground, has set the flow on how we can proceed with these sessions, but also how we can learn from one another. I understand we are from multiple backgrounds, from multiple various economic levels, so we can learn from one another here, from large economies to small economies like ours. So just as a brief introduction of mine, I represent the Zanzibar National Chamber of Commerce, which is the umbrella body of the private sector in Zanzibar. And we are about 800 people here. I'm sure some of you may not know what Zanzibar is. So Zanzibar is part of what it makes Tanzania. Tanzania is the union of two countries, formerly Tanganyika and Zanzibar. So Zanzibar still maintains its semi-autonomous status. So we run our own things when it comes to businesses, when it comes to tourism and other things, economic things. But otherwise, internationally, we are part of Tanzania. So as a umbrella body of the private sector in Zanzibar, we work very closely with the government in different angles, including the anti-corruption and the economic crimes. We work very closely with the Zanzibar Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Authority for many years now. The private sector, we have formed a committee, which is known as Zanzibar Integrated Strategy on Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes. We work very closely together in terms of training, in terms of capacity building. I appreciate Madam Nouri, who has extensively spoken about the importance of a training of different stakeholders in different perspectives. So for that perspective, we work very closely together with the government on training our people, especially the private sector. We take the role of training and capacity building of the private sector when it comes to the issues of the anti-corruption and the economic crimes. But we also work with revenue authorities in Zanzibar to promote ethical behavior, ethical ways of doing business. So we have suggested to the revenue authorities in Zanzibar, for example, to award those who are paying taxes voluntarily with no pushes from the government, and it has done. From last year, it has awarded some of the business people who are really obedient to the rules, to the regulations of the tax payment. But there are some challenges still we are facing as a private sector, also as a business, as a small business in Zanzibar. For example, we heard from Nuri. She spoke about the systems that are available in Malaysia in running businesses, in running the private sector in Malaysia. So in many private sector organizations in Zanzibar and in Tanzania, there is lack of this system. There is lack of anti-corruption policies, for example. So in many of our organizations, you will find some operational documents, operational manuals and policies, but you will miss the anti-corruption policies and regulations, for example. So this is one of the areas that I see is lacking from our running of businesses. But also on the side of the governments, you will see there are these anti-corruption policies and guidelines, but the implementation is not there. So once there is lack of implementation of the policies from the government side to push it to the private sector, then it's difficult to get the private sector to be compliant with those regulations, because there is lacking the enforcement of the policies. But another thing that it's a challenge is for the private sector in supporting the anti-corruption movements is the business environment itself, because we all understand here that the private sector is pro-profit. They are there for profit. They want to make profit. And for them to make the profit, there should be a conducive business environment for everyone to play their role, to get their benefit, what they want, but also to pay their dues to the government. So if the business environment is not conducive for the business people, then they will find their way to get out of that and make their profit. That is why you find in many instances there is smuggling of some products from the island of Zanzibar to other parts of the mainland, or even to the other side of the country, which is Kenya. And this is because of the business environment that is not supportive of doing, in integrity in businesses. I think I will stop there for now, but one thing I would like to insist is that there need to be a transparency in doing businesses, but also in formulating our policies and implementing the anti-corruption policies. Because you find sometimes the government makes the policies without involving the private sector. The policies are for the private sector as implementers. They are there for us to implement and to abide with. But if we are not part of its making, then it becomes difficult for us to implement them. But also, you find sometimes there's lack of transparency. For instance, we are all there for supporting the government in fighting corruption and economic crimes, but you always find, for example, there are people who are against the rules, against the laws, but you find no one being held responsible for that. So it discourages people to continue supporting the anti-corruption movements. So this is my call for all the governments, especially from the developing countries, to be transparent, but also to put in place the conducive business environment so that everyone is supportive for the anti-corruption movement. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hamad, and it's really interesting to sort of get your insight from Zanzibar, of course, being a smaller nation there. And maybe just to mention that, yes, of course, I agree with you in terms of having this sort of interaction with the government, so they can also involve all stakeholders during the development of these policies. But I think also something else, just to complement on your point, is for us as the private sector, just basically having things in check within the organization, because this is sort of like the internal mechanisms within us. And maybe this is where I want to ask an additional question, just so you can maybe bring out some of these things. What challenges, because you represent an umbrella body, what challenges are inherent to implementing this anti-corruption policies, ethics and compliance programs for small and medium businesses? And the second question is, what do you see the role of leadership and management being, in setting an example for ethical behavior and compliance, with the anti-corruption measures, maybe in just 2 minutes? Thank you.
Okay, so I think I have addressed the first part of your question when it comes to challenges to MSME. But for the leadership part now, I think the leadership plays a significant role in setting example of fighting anti-corruption. So this spans in all levels of the governance, from the government side, but also from the private sector side. And from the private sector side, I speak of for people like myself, the leaders of the business organizations, but also the leaders of the enterprises, the leaders of the corporates, the business corporates. So we play a significant role in setting examples for our employees and for our colleagues in our workplaces. So I think it's very important for us to show a good example. It's very important for us to convene trainings, to convene messages like this, what we are getting here, to convene to our colleagues so that they are all aware of what is happening and how we should do our businesses in an integrity manner so that we are all respected. And once you show a good example to our governments, and then this is where they become lenient, they become supportive of what we are doing, and then we are becoming one thing in raising our economies and building our economy together. So that should be my feedback to your second part of the question.
Thank you so much, Hamad. Really, really thanks. And maybe what I can add to just compliment as well is by signing the call to action that Fabian presented. This is an anti-corruption call from businesses to governments, and of course, it helps to fully implement the UN Convention Against Corruption, strengthening, and it builds, of course, to strengthen integrity within our economy. So thank you so much, Hamad, for your intervention. We really appreciate it. So
thank you.
Moving on. Thank you so much. Sorry, there was a lag there. So moving on to Fernanda, please, you have the floor. Just brief introduction and let us know how you situate yourself within today's topic from your organization. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to United Nations, to you, Benjamin and Florian. For me, it is really a pleasure to be here with a so relevant audience, and an honor, a pleasure to share the floor with so distinguished colleagues, which I was hearing and I learned a lot. So thank you very much. Here in Uruguay, it's midday, so I am having, let's say, it's fun because I am full of sun. Yes, so it is the perfect moment to talk. And I am honored too because I work for a German company that is Sobitech, Solar Wind Technology. In English is solar wind technology. So it goes hands to hands, yes. And also I am really happy because this week in Uruguay, we are receiving an international energy conference from Olade and Irena. So really happy just to be talking about anti-corruption in that frame, yes. Just to tell you a bit about myself, I have been for more than 10 years working in Sobitech as a compliance officer. I have started from Uruguay, then to Latin America, and then the global from an international perspective, in charge of compliance, that means also anti-corruption, and ESG, that goes hands to hands with sustainability, and Equator principles to comply with the World Bank. I have developed from scratch the compliance policies and the implementation of the process. And our sustainability policy is, we think that sustainability growth is only possible if we combine it with integrity. And we see integrity as something transversal, yes, to all the company, but also to our stakeholders and through the whole supply chain. That means not only our direct business, clients, suppliers, but we also work, yes, since 2014 in trying to create collective actions and not necessarily being ourselves directly involved, but just trying to merge, yes, different interests when we detect some issues in connection with corruption. For example, in Uruguay, we have helped to create collective actions in the customs broker agency in Uruguay. And so we are on that path. In a way, I have to be honest with you, I am based in Uruguay. Uruguay is one of the best countries after Denmark and so on, but in Latin America, we are hands to hands with Chile in terms of transparency, international transparency index. We know transparency index shows the perception. That not necessarily means what is really, okay? But we have a really good reputation in Uruguay in terms of corruption. Today morning, I was also in a UNODC event because we are working in supporting a project, a draft project to support Uruguay, yes, to create an anti-corruption law to regulate the private sector. Because up to now, we only have law in terms of corruption in the public. So that is the path where we are going on in Uruguay. And also just to give a perspective and introduction of how I have implemented, yes, the compliance issue here in Sovitech, we follow the United Nations Global Compact Management, the WHEEL model with six steps, just to commit just the worth, then the middle management, yes, to assess, that means just to identify the risk through risk assessment, extraterritoriality, risk assessment, yes. I don't know if I have already explained to you that we developed huge renewable energy projects, where the majority of them, we sell them into the government. That means that we go into bid tender process, which means plenty of risk. Yes, and we really follow a logbook of how to deal with the government during that process. And we also have Sovitech integrity policy, how to do it, how to create integrity together with the government. Yes, of course, there are certain countries where we have a small spot market where we sell the energy to particulars, okay? But that is a really low percent, so the risk goes directly into the public sector, public and private. In the Rio de la Plata, between Argentina and Uruguay, we said that the tango, and special dance, we dance it into public and private sector, yes? So that will be, we put a lot of conscious in the risk assessment and the bribery risk assessment in connection with tender process, and in that dance with the public sector, the habilitation of authorizations, environmental, social authorization to do the prefactibility projects, to start with the construction, with the operation, and so on. Even though we sell the project ready to build, but we comply, yes, by that way with equator principles, yes? So we need to follow all that. We just give the security of the project until the commission phase. Due to that, the anti-corruption policies, it is a huge projection, yes, for the project in connection with the government, community, and of course the whole supply chain and the different stakeholders, which include, of course, environmental NGO, commercial areas, and so on. So we were in the phase, in the stage 2, assets, then in the 3, one, we define, yes, once we have the risk assessment, we know the concept, we do a hot map matrix where we defined our red points, we take care of them, and thanks to them, we start to define how we are going to implement our compliance project. I go into the fourth state, that is implementation, then the 5, how we are going to measure it, and then how we are going to communicate it. We have a global compliance perspective, but we adapt it into each region and into each country, because each country is different. Yes, not only by the way we sell the energy, but also about the risk. For example, in Uruguay and in Chile, where we should be proud about the good perception of corruption, we have a huge risk that is conflict of interest. Yes, specifically in Uruguay, well, we have a very low population. What does it mean? That means that we are friends of all. So we work a lot of that, and I think that is the gray area, which is really, I feel passionate about that, because the easier way will be, okay, don't do it. But that is not the way to proceed. Of course, where there is red risk, of course, we don't do it, but the majority of the time it is yellow. How we are going to handle with that situation, yes, and then we start to implement a policy so that feasible conflict of interest is not going to be manifest, yes. And then also, if you allow me, I will share some academic perspective, because I am also compliance professor. So always I try just to merge something theoretical.
Yes, shortly, really Fernanda. Thank you.
Thank you. I am happy to, if you have some questions, I am happy to collaborate.
Yes, thank you so much. So I was just saying that, yeah, I was asking you to, if you could summarize the intervention you wanted to give, but maybe I can just ask you a question and you can see if this fits into maybe what we have in mind. And it's basically asking you to describe it. It's very interesting because you mentioned about your engagement in some of this, high risk regions or industries or interventions and dealings with the government. So the question is just if you could describe any specific due diligence that you procedures your company follows when especially entering into new business relationships in these high risk areas, and how your organization engages with the third parties while promoting ethical business practices throughout your supply chain. And also in connection to this is, how can these parties then be held accountable for this unethical behavior, if at all?
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Yes, we just start to identify the kind of transactions we are working on, because we really, when we start, the way of doing business, it was quite simple, let's say it, yes. But as times goes by, and after COVID and so on, things are not so easy. It's not so easy to sell a huge project. Then you start to do merge with different players and to create different way of operating, different way of special purpose vehicle, different kind of society to continue with the project. So first we do an internal risk assessment of that specific transactions. Yes, for example, it's going to be a joint venture, merger and acquisition, and so on. Yes, so first it's just the concept of the transactions, and we identified that risk. And we also consider the country where we are operating, and also all the legal regulations, where we have some basic ones that goes hands to hands with the extraterritoriality law. Yes, that is transversal to the company, but we add also the local law. And then we start with the issue that not we as a compliance officer always have fun, that is the basic anti-corruption checklists, which is internal, where we use open data, that means free open data. And when we need something extra, we need softwares for doing that. And we start to do certain kind of connections with commerce chambers and so on. In some countries that were really risk, I got in touch with Basel Institute and so on. Yes, we start to do our internal checklist on desk. It's something that we do when we acquire and also when we enter into a new business relationship and also into a new market, yes, a new country. It's just identified any issue that may affect the customer ability to fulfill with our contract obligations, such as financial stability, legal compliance, and any systems and its phase of maturity. And it's not only for the company, but also for the people that are in charge of that and to whom we are working on interconnected. Yes, as who do it? Yes, that is the second question. Usually it should be the compliance officer, but sometimes in certain countries, we have like different hats in that area, yes? So it's transversal. So we look for certain department that can help. We take a lot that we are not going to have even a conflict of interest during the internal process. Yes, that is something that it is key. Then we ask our prospective business partner to collaborate with us. We give them to fill them in their office and know your partner, because it's not always clients, yes, where we have two different ways to know how to ask, and we really take care about confidential and private information. So we divide it in reference with the level of relationship that we're going to go on. Of course, when we are under a merge and acquisitions or a joint venture, we have a template with plenty of questions, yes. And another one, less demanding, when we go with a regular compliance screen. Yes, that is something that the business partners provide to us, and then we cross-checked with our internal anti-corruption checklist and the one that came from outside. Yes, and then that is something really which I really like it. We start to interact with that company. Yes, usually I used to have a call with them. Just I ask, yes, and sometimes I do it directly. Sometimes the business development team, the one that is in connection with those transactions, ask them for them code of conduct, compliance issues, even though we have already checked it if it is private, public or not. And then we start to see if there is a gap. Yes, in case there is a gap, we get in contact with them to try to fulfill as much as possible with our requirements. It's not only to sign it, it's just we try to do as much as possible a due diligence, a random due diligence, yes, to check if effectively they are working as the way we expect for that. We have another special instrument that is called compliance rule for third party. That will be like a code of conduct for third party, where we reserve the right to do those kind of audits, random audit at our own discretion, and to see if something is not going by the way we were planning, yes, in terms of compliance, we have the right, yes, just to conclude with a contract, yes. And then if we detect a gap, we start with a sensible process. It's not like training, because we don't feel that we have to train anyone. It's like everyone's born in ethics. No one wake up saying today I will corrupt. Yes, it's just try to facilitate an instance where we share our principles, basic, what we understand as a corruption. That is basic, because, for example, World Bank see it more like in the public sector, and we go for the one, yes, for the that goes with international transparency, and from GSS, from the Sherman, the cooperation frame from Sherman government. we adapted that said that is anything that means an abuse of power for private benefits. Yes, so we go for a more wide perspective. Going back when I was in the introduction sharing that we work really hard to try to create collective actions, even going out of our specific industry. Since 2018, I am collaborating with the Alliance for Integrity from GISZ, from the International Cooperation from German government, just giving training from enterprise to enterprise. In Spanish, we said DEPE, de empresas para empresas, and also with Pasaporte a la Integridad, Integrity Passport, where we evaluate, yes, how a company, especially as ESMS, a small and medium enterprise, develop their own project, and then we evaluate them. Because we are really convinced that we cannot be doing business in a country where that is not a common way of working. I will tell you something that was really challenging. We have left 2 countries due to that, because we were waiting to start operating, even though we were with offices there. But in a moment we said, it's impossible. If you really want to interact with the government, it's impossible to comply. We wait, and said, okay, no way, we left. So it's not easy, and we are in some risky countries, but we understand that we really need to interact with our whole supply chain. Doing facilitations, coffee, integrity coffee, tea, integrity cafe, mate here in Rio de la Plata, because we drink mate, but in connection with them. And always in a friendly way. Yes, the trainings have to be something friendly, like storytelling, just talking about some news that we have saw in the world, yes, and always thinking in Schumacher. Do you remember the F1?
Thank you, Fernanda. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I really apologize. I've just noticed we're really running out of time at the moment.
I'm sorry.
And I really apologize for cutting you short. But yeah, I'm just cognizant that, you know, it's really late at some places. And I'm just thinking maybe we can probably just proceed with the next session. And I'm really sorry to cut you off, but I'm sure your insights have really been no problem. I'm sure your insights have really been well acknowledged. There's a couple of very interesting questions, and based on this as well, and of course this shall we shall continue with this also in the next webinar sessions, and I'm sure from our resources as well from UNGC and UNODC we can get also a couple of responses from what the audience is asking. So once again, thank you so much, Fernanda, and yeah, I apologize for the short time. It seems time is just moving now. So thank you so much.